The last scarlet ray of sunset cast a shadow across Sophia Turner's face as she heard the words that would forever alter her life. "I'm afraid I've lost everything, Sophia, including you." Harold Turner's voice was flat, devoid of the remorse one might expect from a man who had just wagered and lost his wife of 3 years. Montana Territory, 1876. Dillon was a town caught between the old frontier and the promise of progress, not unlike Sophia herself. At 22, she had married Harold, believing his promises of stability and respectability, a welcome change from her childhood of transience following her parents' deaths. Now, at 25, she stood in their modest home, watching her husband's hollow eyes, understanding finally the depth of his gambling addiction. "What do you mean, you've lost me?" Sophia's voice trembled despite her attempt at composure. The evening breeze fluttered the lace curtains she'd sewn herself, bringing with it the distant sounds of the saloon where Harold had spent the night. Harold couldn't meet her gaze, his fingers twisting nervously at his side. It was a high-stakes game. Preston was winning everything, I thought. I thought I could turn it around with one big bet. A bet involving me. The horror of his words began to sink in. "How is that even possible?" Harold pulled a folded document from his pocket. "I signed a paper. If I lost, you'd belong to the winner." Sophia's knees weakened. She clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white. "I'm not property to be traded, Harold. This is 1876, not the Dark Ages." "The law won't see it that way," Harold whispered. "Not here, not with Preston being who he is." Judge Preston was the richest man in Dillon, controlling everything from the mines to most of the businesses downtown. His word was practically law. Who won? Sophia's voice was barely audible. Harold finally looked up. "Not Preston. That new rancher from Texas. The one they call the Cowboy. Ethan McAllister." Sophia felt a chill. Everyone in town had heard of McAllister, though few had actually met him. He'd arrived 6 months ago, purchased the old Blackwater ranch outside town, and kept mostly to himself, except for occasional trips into Dillon for supplies or the rare social gathering. Tall, imposing, with eyes that seemed to see right through a person, that was the description she'd heard from the ladies at church. "When?" The word caught in her throat. "He's coming tomorrow." Harold slumped into a chair. "To collect." Sophia felt rage building within her, replacing the initial shock. "You're a coward, Harold Turner. A spineless, selfish coward." She turned away, unable to look at him any longer. The life she'd built, the garden she'd planted behind their small house, the quilting circle she'd joined, the students she tutored in reading and arithmetic, all of it threatened because of her husband's weakness. "I'll run," she said suddenly, whirling back to face him. "I'll be gone by morning." "He'll find you," Harold said wearily. "Men like McAllister always do, and then it will be worse for both of us." Sophia began pacing, her mind racing. There must be something. A knock at the door froze them both. "It's too early," Harold whispered, face draining of color. "He wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow." The knock came again, more insistent this time. Sophia straightened her back, smoothed her skirts, and moved toward the door. "Sophia, don't," but she had already pulled it open, determined to face whatever fate awaited her with dignity. The man standing on her porch was taller than she'd imagined, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the darkening sky. A black Stetson cast shadows across features that seemed carved from stone, yet his eyes, a startling shade of blue, were what caught and held her attention. "Mrs. Turner." His voice was deep, with a slight Texas drawl that softened the edges of the words. "Yes." Sophia lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "Ethan McAllister." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "I believe your husband is expecting me." Harold appeared behind Sophia, his face ashen. "McAllister, you said tomorrow." "I prefer to settle my affairs promptly." McAllister's gaze never left Sophia's face. "May I come in?" Without waiting for an answer, he stepped across the threshold, bringing with him the scents of leather and open prairie. In his hand was a folded document that Sophia recognized instantly as the deed Harold had mentioned. "Mrs. Turner, I imagine this situation comes as a shock to you," McAllister said, his tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. "That's putting it mildly, Mr. McAllister." Sophia was surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The cowboy nodded, a flicker of something respect crossing his features. He turned to Harold. "You've explained the terms of our arrangement." Harold nodded miserably. "Yes. Good." McAllister unfolded the document, examining it briefly. Without ceremony, he tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths, until it was nothing but confetti in his large hands. Sophia gasped. "What are you doing?" Harold stepped forward, confusion evident. McAllister dropped the torn pieces onto their table. "I didn't come to collect a woman, Turner. I came to make something clear." His voice hardened. "No man with an ounce of honor bets his wife in a card game." Relief flooded Sophia, quickly followed by confusion. "Then why come at all?" she asked. McAllister turned those piercing blue eyes on her again. "To ensure you knew you were free, and to make certain your husband understood that if he ever attempts something like this again, he'll answer to me." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Harold swallowed hard. "I understand." "I doubt that," McAllister said coldly, "but perhaps you'll learn." He turned back to Sophia, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Turner, I apologize for the distress this has caused you." With that, he placed his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. Sophia followed him, a thousand questions swirling in her mind. "Mr. McAllister," she called as he reached the porch steps. He paused, turning back. "Why did you tear up the deed? It was legally binding, wasn't it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Some things matter more than what's legal, Mrs. Turner." He tipped his hat. "Good evening." Sophia watched him mount his horse, a magnificent black stallion that seemed as formidable as its owner, and ride away, his figure gradually disappearing into the gathering darkness. When she returned inside, Harold was gathering the torn pieces of paper, his hands shaking. "You've been given a second chance," Sophia said quietly. "We both have." Harold looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "But not together," she continued. "I'll be gone by morning, Harold. Don't try to find me." "Sophia, please, no." Her voice was firm, final. "What you did can't be undone." "Not by me, not by Mr. McAllister's act of decency." "You sold me, Harold. That's not something I can live with." As she packed her belongings that night, Sophia realized that for the first time since her parents' death, she felt truly alone. Yet oddly, beneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else, a flicker of possibility, of freedom she hadn't felt in years. Dawn was breaking when Sophia left the house the following morning, a single valise containing her most essential belongings in hand. She'd left a note for Harold alongside her wedding ring on the kitchen table. The streets of Dillon were quiet at this hour, with only the occasional early riser beginning their day's work. She had exactly $27.43 to her name, her secret savings from tutoring, hidden in a jar beneath the floorboards of their bedroom. It wouldn't take her far, but it would be enough to start somewhere new. Perhaps Helena, or possibly as far as Denver. The stagecoach wouldn't leave until noon, leaving her with hours to wait. Unwilling to risk encountering Harold, Sophia decided to walk to the edge of town, to a small creek where she often went when she needed solitude. The morning was cool but promised warmth later, the Montana spring tentatively giving way to summer. Wildflowers dotted the grassy path leading to the creek, and Sophia paused to pick a few, their cheerful colors a contrast to her somber mood. At the creek, she was startled to find she wasn't alone. A large chestnut horse grazed nearby, and seated on a fallen log, staring contemplatively at the rushing water, was Ethan McAllister. He looked up at her approach, surprise evident in his expression before he quickly masked it and stood. "Mrs. Turner," he said, removing his hat. "Mr. McAllister." Sophia hesitated, uncertain whether to stay or leave him to his solitude. "Please," he gestured to the log, "don't let me chase you away." After a moment's consideration, Sophia sat, placing her valise beside her. They remained in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the babbling of the creek and the occasional whicker from McAllister's horse. "You're leaving," he finally said, nodding toward her bag. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." Sophia watched a leaf float downstream, twisting in the current. "There's nothing for me here anymore." McAllister nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "I'm not entirely sure yet. Somewhere I can start fresh." "Alone?" The question hung in the air between them. Sophia turned to study him, noting the way the morning light softened his features, making him appear younger than he had the previous evening. "Yes, Mr. McAllister. Alone." She couldn't keep a trace of bitterness from her voice. "It seems that's my lot." He was quiet for a moment. "I know something about being alone, Mrs. Turner." There was a wealth of meaning in those simple words, a hint at a past that had shaped him. Sophia found herself curious despite her circumstances. "You have family, Mr. McAllister." "Not anymore." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hand. "Lost my parents to fever when I was 16. My younger sister followed a year later. Been on my own since then." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. "I lost my parents too when I was 18, a stage robbery near Cheyenne." McAllister nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's why you married Turner." Sophia looked away. "Partly he seemed safe, reliable." She gave a humorless laugh. "How wrong I was." "We all make mistakes in judgment," McAllister said, "some more costly than others." They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts. Sophia glanced at him surreptitiously, noting the strong profile, the tiny scar near his right eyebrow, the capable hands that now idly twisted a blade of grass. "Why did you really tear up that deed, Mr. McAllister?" The question had burned in her mind since the previous evening. He looked at her directly then, his blue eyes intent. "Because no piece of paper could ever give one person ownership over another. Not in my view. Even though the law might say otherwise, especially then." His voice hardened slightly. "I've seen enough injustice in my time to know that what's legal isn't always what's right." Sophia nodded slowly. "Well, whatever your reasons, I'm grateful." McAllister stood suddenly, brushing off his pants. "The morning's getting on." "May I walk you back to town, Mrs. Turner?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded, gathering her valise. As they walked side by side along the path, their shadows stretching before them in the strengthening sun, she felt a curious sense of ease in his company. "What will you do now?" she asked. "In Dillon, I mean. Continue building my ranch, I suppose. It's good land with plenty of water. Could be something significant given time and effort." "Alone?" She echoed his earlier question, a small smile tugging at her lips. He glanced at her, a matching smile briefly lighting his usually serious features. "For now." They reached the edge of town, where the dirt path gave way to Dillon's main street. Already the day was coming alive, with shopkeepers opening their doors and the blacksmith's forge sending smoke into the clear sky. "When does your stage leave?" McAllister asked. "Noon." He checked his pocket watch. "That gives you nearly 3 hours. Have you eaten?" Sophia shook her head. "Allow me to buy you breakfast then." "A parting gesture, if you will." She hesitated. Being seen publicly with McAllister would certainly start tongues wagging, especially so soon after leaving Harold. Yet she found herself nodding. "Thank you. That would be kind." They walked to Dylan's only hotel, which boasted the best restaurant in town. McAllister held the door for her, and they entered the relatively quiet dining room. A few early diners glanced their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. The hostess, Mrs. Abernathy, a plump woman known for her efficient manner and encyclopedic knowledge of town gossip, widened her eyes at the sight of them. "Mrs. Turner, Mr. McAllister," she greeted, unable to hide her surprise. "Table for two." "Yes, thank you," McAllister answered smoothly. "Somewhere quiet, if possible." Mrs. Abernathy led them to a corner table partially screened by a large potted fern. As they sat, Sophia could almost feel the speculation building around them. "I'm sorry," McAllister said quietly after they'd ordered. "I didn't consider how this might appear." "It doesn't matter," Sophia replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I'll be gone in a few hours anyway." Their breakfast arrived: fluffy scrambled eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits with honey. Sophia realized she was ravenous, having been too anxious to eat the night before. As they ate, their conversation flowed more easily than she would have expected. McAllister told her about his ranch, his plans to breed horses as well as cattle, his love for the Montana landscape that reminded him of parts of Texas, but with more water and trees. In turn, Sophia shared her love of teaching, her hope to perhaps find a position as a schoolteacher wherever she settled next. "You're educated, then?" McAllister asked. "My father believed in education for daughters as well as sons," Sophia explained. "He taught at a small college in Ohio before moving west for my mother's health. He continued teaching me from his books even after we left." McAllister nodded approvingly. "A wise man." "He was." Sophia's voice softened with memory. "He used to say knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take from you." He was right about that. McAllister set down his coffee cup. "Mrs. Turner, please," she interrupted. "Call me Sophia. After all this formality seems rather pointless." A smile touched his lips. "Sophia, then." "And I'm Ethan." "Ethan," she repeated, finding she liked the sound of it. "Sophia, I have a proposition for you." At her raised eyebrow, he quickly continued. "Not that kind, a business proposition. I'm listening. My ranch is growing. I've recently acquired 30 more head of cattle and expect to expand further by year's end. The house is substantial, built by the previous owner with ambitions of starting a family, and currently sits mostly empty." He paused, seeming to carefully consider his next words. "I find myself in need of someone to manage the household affairs, someone educated, capable, trustworthy." Sophia stared at him. "Are you offering me employment?" "Yes." His gaze was steady. "Room and board plus $30 a month. Your duties would include overseeing the house, managing provisions, perhaps keeping the books. I've never had much head for figures." "Why me?" Sophia asked, genuinely puzzled. "You barely know me." "I'm a good judge of character," Ethan replied. "Have to be in my line of work. And frankly, finding someone suitable in Dylan has proven challenging. Most unattached women here are either too young or—" He hesitated. "Connected to establishments I'd rather not associate with." Sophia understood his meaning. The saloon girls and dance hall women were often the only single women in frontier towns. "It would be temporary, of course," he continued, "until you decide where you truly want to settle, but it would give you time to save more money, make plans without rushing." The offer was tempting. $30 a month was more than she could hope to make as a new teacher in most towns, and the security of room and board would allow her to save nearly all of it. "I wouldn't be a housekeeper," she clarified, wanting to understand exactly what he was proposing. but more of a household manager. Exactly. Ethan nodded. I have a cook already, Jorge, a fellow I met in Texas, and 2 ranch hands who help with the heavy work, but no one to oversee it all, to bring some civilization to the place. He smiled slightly. It's becoming rather bachelor primitive, I'm afraid. Sophia considered the offer, turning it over in her mind. People would talk, she said finally. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch. People always talk, Ethan countered. But my ranch is 7 miles from town. You'd have your own quarters, a separate wing of the house entirely. And my reputation, while perhaps not extensive in Dillon, is one of fairness and honesty. I wouldn't risk that. The clock on the wall showed it was nearly 11. Soon she would need to make her way to the stage office if she intended to leave. May I think about it? She asked. Of course. Ethan signaled for the check. The stage to Helena comes through again on Friday. That gives you 4 days to decide if you're heading that direction. They left the restaurant together, stepping out into the now bustling Main Street. Sophia was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way, particularly when Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife, hurried past with a scandalized expression after spotting them. I should get my ticket, Sophia said. Ethan nodded. I'll walk you to the stage office. As they made their way down the street, Sophia caught sight of a familiar figure emerging from the saloon. Harold, looking disheveled and desperate, his eyes scanning the street until they landed on her. His face registered shock, then anger when he noticed Ethan beside her. Sophia, he called, hurrying toward them. Ethan tensed beside her but remained silent, clearly allowing her to handle the situation as she chose. Harold reached them, his breath reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. Where are you going? I've been looking everywhere for you. I left you a note, Harold, Sophia said calmly. I'm leaving Dillon. Harold's bloodshot eyes darted to Ethan, narrowing with suspicion. With him? Is that what this was all about? You two planning this all along? Don't be ridiculous, Sophia snapped. Until yesterday evening, I'd never even met Mr. McAllister. Then why are you with him now? Harold demanded, his voice rising. People on the street were beginning to stare. Mr. McAllister kindly offered me breakfast after we happened to meet this morning, Sophia explained, keeping her voice level. Nothing more. Harold laughed bitterly. Nothing more. You expect me to believe that after he tore up a perfectly legal deed? No man does that unless he wants something. Ethan, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward slightly. Turner, you're making a scene and upsetting your wife. I suggest you go home and sober up. She's not going anywhere, Harold said, reaching for Sophia's arm. She's my wife and she's coming home with me. Sophia stepped back, avoiding his grasp. No, Harold, I'm not. Something dangerous flashed in Harold's eyes. Before anyone could react, he lunged forward, grabbing Sophia's wrist in a painful grip. Let go of me, she demanded, trying to pull away. In a blur of movement, Ethan's hand closed around Harold's forearm, applying enough pressure to make him release Sophia with a yelp of pain. The lady said no. Ethan's voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable warning. Harold wrenched his arm free, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, he spat, before turning and stumbling back toward the saloon. Sophia rubbed her wrist, which was already showing signs of bruising. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan's expression was grim. Are you all right? Yes. But the encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The stage suddenly seemed less appealing. Harold knew her destination, could potentially follow on the next one. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan spoke. My offer stands. The ranch would be safer than traveling alone, at least until you decide your next move. Sophia looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive. She found only concern and sincerity in his blue eyes. "All right," she said finally. "I accept your offer, temporarily." Relief flashed briefly across Ethan's features. "Good. I've got my wagon at the livery. We can leave whenever you're ready." An hour later, they were heading out of Dillon. Sophia seated beside Ethan on the wagon bench, her valise secured in the back alongside supplies he'd purchased in town. The sun was high now, warming the spring air and bringing out the scents of pine and wildflowers as they left the town behind. Sophia felt a curious mixture of trepidation and anticipation. She was putting a great deal of trust in a man she barely knew, yet something about Ethan McAllister inspired confidence. Perhaps it was the way he'd torn that deed without hesitation, or his quiet strength during Harold's confrontation. Whatever it was, as Dillon receded into the distance and the open country spread before them, Sophia realized she was breathing more easily than she had in months, maybe years. "It's beautiful," she said, as they crested a rise that revealed the valley beyond, where the Blackwater Ranch, now McAllister Ranch, sprawled across acres of lush grassland, bordered by a winding river and backed by distant mountains still capped with snow. "Yes," Ethan agreed, a note of pride in his voice. "It is." As they approached the ranch, Sophia could make out a large two-story house built of sturdy logs but with an air of elegance unusual for frontier architecture. Wide verandas wrapped around both levels, and multiple chimneys suggested generous fireplaces within. Nearby stood a barn, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, while closer at hand, several horses watched their approach from a paddock. "It's larger than I expected," Sophia commented. "Blackwater, the previous owner, had grand dreams," Ethan explained. "Built the house for a bride who never came, died before he could finish establishing the ranch properly." They pulled up in front of the house, where a middle-aged Mexican man was emerging from what appeared to be a summer kitchen attached to the main structure. "Jorge," Ethan called, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to offer Sophia his hand. "We have a new addition to the household." Jorge approached, wiping his hands on his apron. His weathered face broke into a welcoming smile. "Buenas tardes, Senora. Welcome to Rancho McAllister. This is Mrs. Sophia Turner," Ethan introduced. "She'll be managing the household affairs from now on." If Jorge found this surprising, he showed no sign of it. He simply nodded respectfully. "Very good, senor. The house has needed a woman's touch for too long." "Jorge is the finest cook west of the Mississippi," Ethan told Sophia. "And the only man I know who can make coffee that doesn't taste like boiled saddle leather." Jorge chuckled. "El Señor exaggerates, but I do make good coffee, this is true." Two cowboys had emerged from the barn and were watching curiously. Ethan waved them over. "Mrs. Turner, this is Luke Donovan and Charlie Bishop, my ranch hands. Boys, this is Mrs. Turner. She'll be managing the house and accounts from now on." The men touched their hats respectfully. Luke was older, perhaps in his 40s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. Charlie was younger, barely 20, with a shock of red hair and freckles. "Madam," Luke said, "pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," Sophia replied, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Charlie, bring Mrs. Turner's bag to the east wing, please," Ethan instructed. "Jorge, is their dinner ready?" "She, senor. Beef stew, cornbread, and apple pie, ready when you are." "Perfect. We'll eat after I've shown Mrs. Turner around." As Charlie took her valise and headed into the house, Ethan offered Sophia his arm. "Shall we?" The interior of the house was impressive, if somewhat sparsely furnished. High ceilings, generous windows, and well-crafted woodwork spoke of the care that had gone into its construction. The main floor contained a large great room with a massive stone fireplace, a dining room that could easily seat 12, a study lined with empty bookshelves, and a kitchen that would be the envy of any housewife in Dillon. The East Wing, Ethan explained, leading her down a hallway, was intended as the ladies' domain, I believe. Blackwater had romantic notions. He opened a door to reveal a lovely sitting room with windows overlooking a garden that, while overgrown, showed signs of once having been beautiful. Beyond the sitting room lay a spacious bedroom with an adjoining bathing room, a luxury Sophia hadn't experienced since leaving Ohio. "This would be your private quarters," Ethan said. "My rooms are in the West Wing on the opposite side of the house, completely separate." Sophia walked to the window, taking in the view of the mountains. "It's lovely." "It needs work," Ethan acknowledged. "The whole place does. Blackwater died 3 years ago and the property stood empty for 2 before I purchased it, but the bones are good." "Like many things," Sophia murmured, almost to herself. They continued the tour upstairs, where several guest bedrooms stood ready but unoccupied. Jorge had a room off the kitchen, while Luke and Charlie lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. "During roundup or busy seasons, we might have more hands staying in the bunkhouse," Ethan explained. "But for now, it's just the 4 of us, 5 counting you." By the time they returned downstairs, Sophia's head was swimming with information, but she felt a growing sense of purpose. The house was indeed in need of a managing hand clean, but lacking the touches that made a house a home. The pantry was organized haphazardly. Linens were stacked without any system, and dust had collected in corners overlooked by whatever rough cleaning the men had attempted. "It's a challenge," she said finally, as they entered the dining room where Jorge was setting out the evening meal. "But one I believe I'm equal to." Ethan's smile was approving. "I thought you might be." Dinner was delicious. Jorge's reputation as a cook was clearly well earned. Conversation flowed easily between the men, with occasional questions directed to Sophia that made her feel included without being the center of attention. "Mrs. Turner was a teacher in Dillon," Ethan mentioned as they enjoyed slices of apple pie. "That's so?" Luke looked interested. "My boy's at that age where he ought to be learning his letters better. Lives with his ma in Helena." "How old is he?" Sophia asked. 8 come July. Smart as a whip but restless. Can't sit still long enough to learn properly, his ma says. "Some children learn better through activity than sitting with books," Sophia observed. "Perhaps he needs lessons that incorporate movement." Luke looked thoughtful. "Never considered that. Always figured learning meant sitting still at a desk." "There are many ways to learn," Sophia smiled. "And many ways to teach." After dinner, Ethan walked Sophia back to her quarters, pausing at the door to the East Wing. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," he said. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you." Sophia hesitated, then added, "For everything." "Your kindness has been unexpected but very welcome." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you can begin making this place your own within reason, of course." "Of course." Sophia smiled. "Good night, Mr. McAllister." "Ethan," he reminded her. "Good night, Sophia." Alone in her new rooms, Sophia unpacked her few belongings, her mind still processing the dramatic change in her circumstances over the past 24 hours. From a wife being wagered in a card game to an independent woman with employment and purpose, it was almost too much to absorb. As she readied herself for bed, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror above the washstand. The woman who gazed back at her seemed different somehow, her eyes clearer, her posture straighter. Free, she realized. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Dawn broke clear and bright over the McAllister ranch, sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been properly washed in too long. Sophia had risen early, eager to begin assessing what needed to be done to bring order to the household. She dressed in her simplest gown, a practical blue cotton with minimal fussiness, and pinned her hair in a no-nonsense knot at the nape of her neck. As she entered the kitchen, she found Jorge already at work, kneading dough for the day's bread. "Buenos dias, Señora Turner," he greeted her cheerfully. "You are an early riser like El Patron." "Good morning, Jorge. Yes, I've always preferred the early hours." She looked around the kitchen, noting its general cleanliness but also the disorganization of utensils and supplies. "Is Mr. McAllister already up and about?" He rides out at dawn most days. Checks the herd, the fences. "A rancher's work is never finished," he says. Jorge nodded toward a copper pot on the stove. "Coffee is fresh. Help yourself." Sophia poured a cup, savoring the rich aroma. "This does smell wonderful." Jorge smiled with pride. "My grandmother's method. The secret is a pinch of cinnamon and patience." Over coffee, Sophia discussed the kitchen's needs with Jorge, who seemed relieved to have someone taking an interest in the household management. He explained the current system or lack thereof for ordering supplies, planning meals, and maintaining the house. "El Patron, he is a good man," Jorge explained, "but he thinks only of the cattle, the horses, the land. The house." He shrugged expressively. "It is an afterthought." "Well, that will change now," Sophia said decisively. She spent the morning making a thorough inventory of the pantry, linen closets, and general household supplies. By noon, she had filled several pages of a ledger with notes, lists, and plans. Ethan returned for the midday meal, dusty from his morning's work, but with an air of satisfaction about him. He paused in the doorway of the dining room, observing Sophia at the table surrounded by her notes. "You've been busy," he commented, removing his hat. Sophia looked up, momentarily struck by how the sunlight from the window caught in his dark hair, highlighting strands of auburn she hadn't noticed before. "There's much to do," she replied, gathering her papers. "But it's a pleasant challenge. Find anything urgent." "Several things," Sophia admitted. "Your linens are threadbare, the pantry needs restocking with more than just basics, and there isn't a decent broom or mop in the entire house." Ethan's lips twitched with amusement. "I see. Anything else?" "The windows haven't been properly cleaned in what appears to be years. There's not a curtain that matches in the entire house, and your account books are—" She hesitated, not wanting to offend. "A disaster," Ethan supplied. "I was going to say in need of organization, but yes, essentially." To her relief, Ethan laughed. "I warned you about my head for figures. Feel free to take whatever measures you deem necessary. I've set up an account for household expenses at Whitaker's General Store in town. Anything you need, put it on the ranch account. Thank you. I'll be prudent, of course." "I trust your judgment." He glanced at her lists. "Will you need to go into town soon for supplies?" Sophia hesitated. The thought of potentially encountering Harold made her uneasy. "Eventually, yes, but perhaps not immediately." Ethan seemed to understand her reluctance. "When you do, one of us will accompany you. Luke's heading in tomorrow for mail and a few ranch supplies. He could take you if you're ready by then." "That would be helpful, thank you." Jorge announced that lunch was ready, and they were soon joined by Luke and Charlie, both dusty from morning work in the corrals. Conversation centered on ranch business, new calves, fences needing repair, plans for the coming summer. Sophia listened with interest, gradually forming a picture of how the ranch operated and where she might be most useful beyond the household management. When Luke mentioned having trouble keeping track of cattle sales and purchases, she saw an opportunity. "I could help with that," she offered. "Set up a proper record-keeping system." Luke looked relieved. That'd be mighty welcome, madam. Numbers ain't my strong suit. Nor mine, Ethan admitted. We've been getting by with a rather haphazard approach. I noticed, Sophia said dryly, earning chuckles from the men. After lunch, Sophia continued her inventory, moving upstairs to assess the guest rooms. Most were sparsely furnished but clean, needing only small touches to make them truly welcoming. She was in the last room, making notes about bedding needs, when she heard a horse approaching at speed. Looking out the window, she saw a rider galloping toward the house, a woman, riding astride rather than side saddle, her dark hair streaming behind her. The woman pulled her horse to a stop in the yard and dismounted with fluid grace, calling out for Ethan. Curious, Sophia made her way downstairs in time to see Ethan greeting the woman with familiar ease. "Rebecca," he was saying, "what brings you out here in such a hurry? You're new." "House guest," the woman replied, her voice carrying clearly. "Word travels fast, Ethan. Half the town's talking about how you've installed Harold Turner's wife at your ranch." Sophia paused at the foot of the stairs, suddenly self-conscious. The woman Rebecca turned at the sound of her footsteps, fixing her with an appraising look. "You must be Mrs. Turner," she said, her tone not unfriendly but cautious. "Yes," Sophia replied, lifting her chin slightly. "And you are Rebecca Montgomery," the woman answered. "My family owns the neighboring ranch." She turned back to Ethan. "I came to warn you. Harold Turner was making quite a scene at the saloon last night, claiming you stole his wife. There's talk he might cause trouble." Ethan's expression hardened. "Let him try." Rebecca sighed. "It's not just him I'm worried about. You know how people talk." "A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch. Mrs. Turner is employed here as my housekeeper and bookkeeper," Ethan said firmly. "Nothing more." Rebecca's gaze shifted back to Sophia, skepticism evident in her expression. "I see." Something about the woman's tone, the hint of judgment, the implication that she knew better, sparked Sophia's pride. "Miss Montgomery," she said, stepping forward, "I appreciate your concern for Mr. McAllister's reputation, but I assure you my position here is entirely proper. I have my own separate quarters and am treated with nothing but respect." Rebecca studied her for a moment, then unexpectedly smiled. "Good. Ethan deserves someone who can stand their ground. Too many women in this territory are either doormats or, well, the opposite extreme." Sophia blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift. We're not." "Of course," Rebecca said, in a tone that suggested she didn't believe it for a minute. "Well, now that I've delivered my warning, I should get back. Father will wonder where I've gone." She turned to Ethan. "Will you be at the Founders' Day dance next Saturday?" "I hadn't planned on it," Ethan replied. "You should come," Rebecca insisted. "Both of you. Show the town there's nothing scandalous happening out here." She winked at Sophia. "Besides, it might do Harold Turner good to see his wife enjoying herself without him." Before either of them could respond, Rebecca had mounted her horse and was trotting out of the yard, calling back, "Saturday at 8, Town Hall. Don't be late." As her figure receded into the distance, Sophia turned to Ethan. "She's quite direct," Ethan chuckled. "Rebecca's never been one to mince words. We grew up together in Texas before her family moved here. She's more like a sister than anything else." "I see." Sophia felt an odd sense of relief at this explanation. "She seems to care about your reputation." "She cares about everyone's business," Ethan corrected with fond exasperation. "Always has." He looked thoughtful. "She might be right about the dance, though. Making a public appearance could help quiet the gossip." Sophia hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready to face the town yet, especially Harold." "You'll have to eventually," Ethan pointed out gently. "Better on your terms than by accident, and you'd have me there." The idea of entering the town hall on Ethan McAllister's arm sent a flutter through Sophia that she promptly ignored. "Perhaps you're right," she conceded, "but I have nothing suitable to wear for a dance. Luke can take you to town tomorrow. I'm sure Dylan's dressmaker can help you find something appropriate." He smiled slightly. "Consider it a business expense. The ranch's bookkeeper should look the part when representing us in town." Sophia couldn't help but return his smile. "Very well, Mr. McAllister. For the sake of the ranch's reputation, I'll attend the dance." The next day found Sophia in Mrs. Hollingsworth's dress shop in Dillon, surrounded by fabrics and patterns. Luke had escorted her to town as promised, then left to attend to ranch business, arranging to meet her for lunch at the hotel before their return journey. Mrs. Hollingsworth, a thin woman with nimble fingers and sharp eyes, clucked her tongue as she took Sophia's measurements. "Such a lovely figure, my dear, hidden under such practical clothes. We must find something that does you justice." She pulled down a bolt of deep green silk. "This would complement your complexion beautifully." "I'm looking for something appropriate for the Founders' Day dance," Sophia explained. "But not too extravagant. Appropriate for a woman in your position, you mean?" Mrs. Hollingsworth's eyes twinkled with barely concealed curiosity. News traveled fast in small towns, and Sophia was well aware that her situation was the subject of much speculation. Rather than avoid it, she decided to address it directly. "Yes, Mrs. Hollingsworth. Appropriate for Mr. McAllister's housekeeper and bookkeeper, who will be accompanying him to the dance in a professional capacity." "Of course, dear," the dressmaker replied, not sounding convinced. "And how is life at the McAllister Ranch? I hear it's quite a grand house." "It's a lovely property," Sophia said noncommittally. Now, about the dress, the bell over the shop door jingled, interrupting their conversation. Sophia turned to see Mary Peterson, the minister's wife, entering with her daughter Emily. "Mrs. Turner," Mary said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you in town so soon." "Mrs. Peterson." Sophia nodded politely. "I'm here on ranch business." Mary's lips tightened slightly. "Yes, we've all heard about your position at the McAllister Ranch." The disapproval in her tone was unmistakable. Before Sophia could respond, Mrs. Hollingsworth jumped in, ever the peacemaker when potential customers were involved. "Mrs. Turner is selecting a dress for the Founders' Day dance," she announced cheerfully. "Perhaps you and Emily will be attending as well, Mrs. Peterson." "Of course," Mary replied. "The minister always gives the blessing to open the festivities." She turned to her daughter. "Emily, why don't you look at the ribbons while I speak with Mrs. Turner?" The girl, about 16, nodded and moved to the display of ribbons near the window, though she kept glancing curiously at Sophia. Mary stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Sophia, I feel compelled to express my concern. Your hasty departure from your marriage and immediate arrangement with Mr. McAllister has raised eyebrows. The minister and I would welcome you at Sunday services, where we might discuss the sanctity of marriage vows." Sophia felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "Mrs. Peterson, while I appreciate your concern, I don't believe my personal circumstances are appropriate topics for public discussion." "When a woman abandons her husband and takes up residence with another man, it becomes a matter of community concern," Mary insisted. "Think of the example you're setting for impressionable young women like Emily." Sophia straightened her spine, keeping her voice level despite her rising indignation. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm employed as Mr. McAllister's housekeeper and bookkeeper. I have my own separate quarters and am treated with perfect propriety. As for my marriage—" She hesitated, then decided the truth might as well be known. "Harold wagered me in a card game." Mr. McAllister won that wager but tore up the deed, recognizing it for the abomination it was. I chose to leave a husband who could treat me as property to be gambled away. If that sets a poor example for Emily, then I suggest you reconsider what values you wish to instill in your daughter. Mary's face had gone pale, her eyes widening with each word. Harold did what? Ask him yourself if you don't believe me, Sophia said wearily. Though I doubt he'll admit it. Mrs. Hollingsworth, who had been pretending not to listen, let out a small gasp. My dear, how dreadful, no wonder you left. Mary seemed genuinely shaken. I had no idea. Harold never mentioned. No, I imagine he wouldn't, Sophia replied. After a moment of awkward silence, Mary spoke again, her tone considerably softened. Sophia, if what you say is true and I have no reason to doubt your word, then perhaps I've been hasty in my judgment. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Mrs. Peterson. You didn't know the full story. Mary nodded, still looking troubled. Nevertheless, your situation remains unconventional. People will talk. Let them, Sophia said firmly. I know the truth of my situation, as does Mr. McAllister. That's all that matters to me. Mary studied her for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Very well. I look forward to seeing you at the dance, Mrs. Turner. She turned to her daughter. Come, Emily, we'll return another time. After they left, Mrs. Hollingsworth let out a long breath. Well, that was something. I do believe you've gained an ally in Mary Peterson, and there's no better advocate in this town when it comes to social matters. I didn't intend to air my private business, Sophia admitted, but perhaps it's better that the truth is known. Indeed, the dressmaker agreed, returning to the bolts of fabric. Now, about that dress. Given what you've just told me, I think we need something that makes a statement, something that says you're a woman of dignity and strength. She pulled out a rich sapphire blue silk. This, I think. With silver trim. You'll outshine every woman at the dance, including Rebecca Montgomery, who's sure to wear something outlandish as usual. Despite herself, Sophia smiled. Nothing too outlandish for me, please. Elegant, my dear. Simply elegant. And perhaps just a touch more fashionable than is strictly necessary for a housekeeper. Mrs. Hollingsworth winked. After all, every woman deserves to look her best, regardless of her station. By the time Luke collected her for lunch, Sophia had been measured for a gown that, while more elaborate than she'd initially intended, made her feel a flutter of excitement when she envisioned wearing it. Mrs. Hollingsworth promised it would be ready by Friday, giving Sophia plenty of time before the Saturday dance. Over lunch at the hotel, Luke mentioned having seen Harold outside the bank, watching them from across the street. Didn't approach, Luke reported. Just stood there glowering. Thought you should know. Thank you, Luke, Sophia replied, trying not to let her unease show. I appreciate your keeping an eye out. Boss would have my hide if I let anything happen to you, Luke said matter-of-factly. Besides, any man who'd bet his wife in a card game ain't worth the dirt under my boots, begging your pardon for the language. Sophia smiled gratefully. No apology needed. I'm beginning to think the same myself. They finished their meal and collected the ranch supplies from Whitaker's general store before heading back. As they left town, Sophia couldn't help glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see Harold following them. But the road behind them remained empty, and gradually her tension eased as they approached the ranch. Ethan was in the yard when they returned, examining the hoof of a chestnut mare held steady by Charlie. He looked up as the wagon approached, raising a hand in greeting. Successful trip. He called as Luke brought the wagon to a stop. Yes, thank you, Sophia replied, accepting Ethan's hand to help her down. Mrs. Hollingsworth is making me a dress for the dance. It will be ready by Friday. Good. Ethan's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. and no trouble in town." Luke answered before Sophia could. Turner was lurking near the bank watching. Didn't approach, though. A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "I see. It's nothing to worry about," Sophia assured him, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. "He's all bluster." "Perhaps," Ethan said. "But Luke will continue to accompany you when you go to town, at least for now." Sophia might have bristled at being managed in her previous life, but now she recognized the concern behind his words. "That's probably wise," she agreed. The days leading up to the dance fell into a pleasant routine. Mornings found Sophia organizing the household. Afternoons were devoted to the ranch books, which were gradually taking shape under her methodical approach. Evenings were spent in the great room, where she had discovered a neglected piano that, while out of tune, was structurally sound. "Do you play?" Ethan asked, finding her testing the keys one evening. "A little," Sophia admitted. "My mother taught me. I'm out of practice, though, and this needs tuning badly." "I'll see if we can get someone out from Helena to tune it," Ethan promised. It would be nice to have music in the house again. On Friday afternoon, Luke drove Sophia to town to collect her dress. Mrs. Hollingsworth was waiting eagerly, the finished gown displayed on a dressmaker's form. "What do you think?" she asked anxiously as Sophia circled it, admiring the craftsmanship. The sapphire blue silk caught the light beautifully. The bodice fitted but modest. The skirt fuller than Sophia typically wore but perfect for dancing. Silver trim accented the neckline and sleeves, adding an elegant touch without being ostentatious. "It's lovely," Sophia breathed, "but I fear it might be too fine for a housekeeper." Mrs. Hollingsworth waved away her concern. "Nonsense. It's perfect for you, whatever your position. Now try it on so I can make any final adjustments." Behind the dressing screen, Sophia slipped into the gown, marveling at how perfectly it fit. When she emerged, Mrs. Hollingsworth clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely stunning. Mr. McAllister won't be able to take his eyes off you." "That's not. I mean, it's not like that," Sophia protested, even as she admired her reflection in the mirror. "Of course not," Mrs. Hollingsworth agreed with a knowing smile. "Now let me check the hem one last time." When Sophia returned to the ranch with the dress carefully boxed, she found an unexpected visitor waiting in the great room. Rebecca Montgomery sat with Ethan, engaged in animated conversation that stopped abruptly when Sophia entered. "Mrs. Turner," Rebecca greeted her with a smile that seemed more genuine than their previous encounter. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by. I brought you something for tomorrow night." She gestured to a small box on the table. "That's very kind," Sophia said, setting her own package down and approaching cautiously. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside the box lay a delicate silver hair comb inset with small sapphires. "Rebecca, it's beautiful, but I couldn't possibly—" "It's just a loan," Rebecca interrupted. "My grandmother brought it from Boston years ago. It would complement blue or green beautifully, and Ethan mentioned you'd chosen a blue dress." Sophia glanced at Ethan, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Mrs. Hollingsworth isn't known for her discretion," he explained. She told Rebecca about the dress when they crossed paths in town. "I insist you wear it," Rebecca said. "Consider it a welcome to Dylan, the proper welcome you should have received instead of gossip and judgment." There was something in her tone that made Sophia ask, "You've heard about Harold, then?" Rebecca's expression darkened. "The whole town has, thanks to Mary Peterson. She's been quite vocal about her change of heart regarding your situation. Harold Turner's stock has fallen considerably." Sophia didn't know whether to be relieved or mortified that her personal business had become such public knowledge. "I didn't intend for everyone to know." "Better they know the truth than believe lies," Rebecca said firmly. "Besides, It's about time someone stood up to Harold Turner. He's always been a weasel, even before he started gambling heavily. You knew him well? Sophia asked, curious about this outspoken woman who seemed to know everyone's business. Our families attended the same church, Rebecca explained. I never understood what you saw in him, to be honest. But then, we all make mistakes. She glanced briefly at Ethan before continuing. The important thing is recognizing them and moving forward. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind her words, but before Sophia could puzzle it out, Rebecca stood. I should be going. Father expects me back for dinner. She turned to Ethan. Remember your promise for the first dance tomorrow. After she left, Sophia raised an eyebrow at Ethan. First dance? He looked slightly uncomfortable. Rebecca has appointed herself my social guardian since I arrived in Dillon. She insists I need to participate more in town events. She seems very invested in your social life, Sophia observed carefully. Ethan shook his head. Not in the way you're thinking. Rebecca and I grew up together, but there's never been anything romantic between us. She's engaged to a railroad man who's currently working in Denver. They'll be married when he returns next spring. I see. Sophia felt oddly relieved. Well, she's very kind to lend me the hair comb. Rebecca has her moments, Ethan agreed with a fond smile. Beneath all that directness is a genuinely good heart. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. I hope you'll save a dance for me tomorrow night as well. Sophia felt a flutter of anticipation. Of course. After all, we should present a united front, shouldn't we? Exactly, Ethan agreed, though something in his expression suggested there might be more to it than mere appearances. Saturday evening arrived clear and pleasantly warm. Sophia spent extra time on her appearance, arranging her hair in a more elaborate style than usual and securing it with Rebecca's silver comb. The blue dress fit perfectly, transforming her reflection into someone she barely recognized, someone confident and poised, with a sparkle in her eyes that had been missing for too long. A knock at her door announced Ethan's arrival. When she opened it, she was momentarily taken aback by his appearance. Gone were the practical work clothes she'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. Instead, he wore a well-tailored dark suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silver brocade vest that somehow complemented her dress as if they'd planned it. You look, he began, then seemed to search for the right word. Presentable, Sophia suggested with a small smile. Beautiful, Ethan corrected, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sent warmth spreading through her. Thank you, she replied, suddenly feeling shy. You look very handsome yourself. They traveled to town in Ethan's buggy rather than the work wagon, the evening air pleasantly cool after the warmth of the day. As they approached Dillon, Sophia felt her nervousness return. Second thoughts? Ethan asked, seeming to sense her tension. A few, she admitted. It's the first time I'll see Harold since I left. You don't have to do this, Ethan reminded her. We can turn around right now. Sophia took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. No, I won't hide. Besides, I have this lovely dress, and Rebecca would be terribly disappointed if her hair comb went unseen. Ethan chuckled. That she would. The town hall was transformed for the Founders' Day celebration, with lanterns strung across the ceiling, bunting decorating the walls, and a small orchestra set up at one end of the room. Nearly everyone in Dillon seemed to be in attendance, from the wealthiest merchants to the humblest ranch hands, all in their finest clothes. As Ethan and Sophia entered, a momentary hush fell over the crowd nearest the door, followed by a surge of whispers. Sophia lifted her chin, determined not to show any discomfort. Rebecca was the first to approach them, resplendent in a bold red gown that would have looked garish on anyone else, but somehow suited her vibrant personality perfectly. "You came," she exclaimed, taking Sophia's hands. "And you're wearing the comb. It looks perfect with your dress." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Mary Peterson is positively green with envy, by the way. Her new dress from Denver doesn't hold a candle to yours." "Rebecca," Ethan admonished gently, "behave yourself." "Never," she replied cheerfully. "Now I believe you promised me the first dance." She glanced at Sophia. "You don't mind if I borrow him, do you? It's tradition." "Of course not," Sophia assured her, though she felt a twinge of disappointment. "I'll find you for the second dance," Ethan promised, before Rebecca dragged him toward the dance floor where couples were already assembling for the opening waltz. Left alone, Sophia found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered comments. Before she could decide whether to find a quiet corner or approach someone she knew, Mary Peterson appeared at her side. "Sophia," she greeted her with surprising warmth. "I'm so glad you came. You look lovely." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," Sophia replied somewhat warily. "Mary, please." The minister's wife looked genuinely contrite. "I owe you an apology for my assumptions. The minister and I have spoken at length about your situation, and we both agree that you've shown remarkable courage." Sophia wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected support. "That's very kind of you to say." "Not kind, truthful," Mary insisted. "And I want you to know that you're welcome at services anytime with no judgment." She lowered her voice slightly. "Harold hasn't shown his face in church since the truth came out. The minister plans to have a very pointed sermon on the sanctity of marriage and the evils of gambling next Sunday, should he decide to return." Despite everything, Sophia felt a pang of sympathy for Harold. "I don't wish him ill, you know. I just couldn't stay with him after what he did." "Of course not," Mary agreed. "No woman with any self-respect could." She glanced toward the entrance. "Oh dear, speaking of your former husband." Sophia turned to see Harold entering the town hall, looking somewhat disheveled despite his attempt at formal attire. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her, narrowing with recognition. "Perhaps I should find the minister," Mary said uncertainly. "In case there's trouble." "No need," Sophia replied, straightening her spine. "I can handle Harold." As if summoned by her words, Harold began making his way through the crowd toward her. People stepped aside, watching with undisguised interest. "Sophia," he said when he reached her, his voice slightly slurred. He'd been drinking, though he wasn't fully drunk. "You look different." "Hello, Harold," she replied evenly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "It's a town event," he said defensively. "I've got as much right to be here as anyone." His gaze slid over her dress, his expression souring. "McAllister must be paying you well for services rendered." Mary gasped at the crude implication, but Sophia remained calm. "Mr. McAllister pays me fairly for my work as his housekeeper and bookkeeper. Nothing more, nothing less." Harold laughed bitterly. "Is that what you're calling it? The whole town knows what's really going on out at that ranch." "The whole town knows you wagered your wife in a card game," Sophia countered, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearest them. "The whole town knows Mr. McAllister tore up that shameful deed rather than claim another man's wife as property. And the whole town knows I left you because of your actions, not because of his." Harold's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You've turned everyone against me with your lies." "I've told no lies, Harold. Only the truth." Sophia took a deep breath, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe this is a celebration, not a place for airing grievances." She turned to walk away, but Harold grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You're not going anywhere. You're still my wife, no matter what you think." "Let go of me," Sophia said quietly but firmly. "Or what?" Harold sneered. "Or I'll make you." The voice came from behind them, steady and cold as steel. Harold released Sophia's arm as if burned, turning to face Ethan, who stood with Rebecca just behind him. The music had stopped, and everyone was watching now. "This is between me and my wife," Harold said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ex-wife, I believe," Ethan corrected. "Or she soon will be, and she asked you to let her go." Harold glared at him, swaying slightly. "You think you're better than me, don't you? Big, important rancher, throwing around your money, stealing other men's wives." "That's enough, Turner," Ethan interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge that made Harold step back. "You're drunk and making a fool of yourself. Go home before you do something you'll regret even more than you already do." For a moment, it seemed Harold might argue further, but then his shoulders slumped, the fight going out of him. "Fine. This place is full of hypocrites anyway." He turned to Sophia, his expression a mixture of bitterness and something that might have been regret. "I hope he's worth it." As Harold stumbled toward the exit, the minister intercepted him, speaking too quietly for Sophia to hear but with obvious concern. After a brief exchange, the minister escorted Harold out, likely ensuring he got home safely. "Well," Rebecca said into the awkward silence that followed, "that was certainly dramatic. But the night is young, the music is waiting, and I believe Ethan owes you a dance, Sophia." As if on cue, the orchestra began playing again, a gentle waltz that seemed to reset the mood of the entire gathering. People gradually returned to their conversations and dancing, the incident with Harold becoming just another piece of gossip to discuss over punch. Ethan turned to Sophia, concern evident in his expression. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she replied, realizing with some surprise that it was true. "Better than I expected, actually." "Would you like to leave?" Sophia shook her head. "No, Rebecca is right. You owe me a dance, Mr. McAllister." A slow smile spread across his face. "Indeed I do, Mrs. Turner." He led her onto the dance floor, one hand resting lightly at her waist, the other taking her hand. As they began to move with the music, Sophia felt the last of her tension melting away, replaced by a warm awareness of Ethan's proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne, the gentle pressure of his hand against hers. "You handled Harold admirably," Ethan commented as they moved smoothly among the other dancers. "I surprised myself," Sophia admitted. "A month ago I would have crumbled." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," Ethan said softly. "I knew that from the moment I met you." Sophia looked up at him, struck by the sincerity in his blue eyes. "You did?" "Yes. It takes courage to face what you did with dignity, to rebuild your life on your own terms." "I've had help," Sophia reminded him. "Your help specifically." "I only provided an opportunity," Ethan countered. "You've done the rest yourself." They continued dancing, conversation giving way to a comfortable silence. Sophia was acutely aware of how well they moved together, how natural it felt to be in his arms. She had never danced with Harold this way, had never felt this curious combination of excitement and peace with him. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. As the waltz ended, Ethan didn't immediately release her hand. "Would you care for some punch? Or another dance?" "Punch, please," Sophia said, needing a moment to collect her thoughts. At the refreshment table, they were joined by Rebecca, her cheeks flushed from dancing. "Everyone's talking about how beautifully you two danced together," she informed them with obvious satisfaction. "And how magnificent you looked putting Harold in his place, Sophia." "I wasn't trying to create a spectacle," Sophia protested. "Of course not, but sometimes a spectacle is exactly what's needed to set the record straight." Rebecca accepted a cup of punch from Ethan. "By tomorrow, no one in Dillon will question your arrangement at the ranch. They'll be too busy discussing Harold's disgrace and your dignified response." "Rebecca," Ethan said warningly, "you're enjoying this too much." "Someone should," she replied unrepentantly. "Oh, look, Mary Peterson is waving me over. Probably wants to know where I got my dress. Excuse me." As she bustled away, Sophia couldn't help but laugh. "She's a force of nature, isn't she?" "Always has been," Ethan agreed, his expression fond. "But her heart's in the right place." The rest of the evening passed pleasantly. Sophia danced not only with Ethan but also with Luke, the minister, and several other men from town who seemed eager to show their support for her. By the time the final dance was announced, she was tired but happier than she'd felt in years. "May I have the last dance?" Ethan asked, appearing at her side as the orchestra prepared for the final waltz. "Of course," Sophia replied, placing her hand in his. This time he held her slightly closer than before, their movements more intimate somehow. Neither spoke as they circled the floor, but Sophia felt a connection building between them that transcended words. As the final notes faded, Ethan's hand tightened slightly on hers. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said softly, "for trusting me enough to face the town together." "Thank you for giving me the courage to do it," Sophia replied, looking up to meet his gaze. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, right there in the middle of the dance floor. Something in his eyes, a question, a longing, made her breath catch. But then he stepped back, offering his arm instead. "Shall we head home?" he asked. "It's getting late." Home. The word sent a warm flutter through Sophia's chest. In just a short time she had come to think of the ranch as home in a way her house with Harold never had been. "Yes," she agreed. "Let's go home." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought beneath a canopy of stars that seemed impossibly bright and close. When they arrived, Ethan helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist just a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Sophia," he said, his voice low and warm in the darkness. "Thank you for the dance." "Good night, Ethan," she replied. "Thank you for everything." She walked to her quarters, feeling his gaze on her back, a delicious tension humming between them that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. As she prepared for bed, removing Rebecca's hair comb and carefully hanging up the beautiful blue dress, Sophia realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Ethan McAllister. The question was, did he feel the same? Summer settled over the ranch, bringing long, sun-drenched days and the steady rhythm of ranch work. The herd was thriving. The garden Sophia had reclaimed from neglect was beginning to produce vegetables, and the house was gradually transforming into a true home under her care. Her position, too, had evolved. What had begun as temporary employment was becoming something more permanent, her role expanding beyond mere household management. She now kept all the ranch accounts, corresponded with cattle buyers, and had even begun teaching Charlie to read better during evening lessons by the fireplace. As for her relationship with Ethan, it remained in a curious limbo, warmer than mere employer and employee, but with neither of them quite brave enough to cross the invisible line that separated friendship from something deeper. There were moments, a lingering glance across the dinner table, their hands brushing as they passed the salt. The way he sometimes sought her opinion on ranch matters that had nothing to do with her official duties that made Sophia wonder if he felt the same growing attachment she did. One sweltering afternoon in late July, Sophia was in the kitchen garden, harvesting tomatoes and beans for dinner, when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw Ethan and Luke riding in, accompanied by a third man she didn't recognize. Setting aside her basket, she walked to meet them, conscious of her plain work dress and the loose tendrils of hair that had escaped her bun in the heat. "Sophia," Ethan called, dismounting with easy grace. "We have a visitor." The stranger removed his hat, revealing thinning hair and a kindly face creased by years in the sun. Judge Wilson, madam, he introduced himself with a slight bow. From Helena. Judge Wilson has ridden down to handle some legal matters, Ethan explained. I took the liberty of inviting him to stay for dinner. Of course, Sophia replied, quickly mentally reviewing their pantry stores. You're most welcome, Judge Wilson. Please come inside out of this heat. While Luke took the horses to the barn, Sophia led Ethan and the judge into the house, which was marginally cooler thanks to the thick log walls and cross-ventilation she'd arranged by opening specific windows. This is quite a property, McAllister, the judge commented, looking around appreciatively as they entered the great room. You've done wonders with it since Blackwater's day. The credit for the house belongs mostly to Mrs. Turner, Ethan replied. She's transformed it from a bachelor's outpost to a proper home. The judge's eyes twinkled as he glanced between them. I see. Well done, Mrs. Turner. Thank you, Judge, Sophia replied. If you'll excuse me, I'll speak with Jorge about dinner arrangements and bring some refreshments. You must be thirsty after your ride. In the kitchen, she found Jorge already preparing to expand the evening meal to accommodate their guest. El Patron sent word ahead with Charlie, he explained when Sophia expressed surprise at his preparations. I've added extra to the stew and am baking another loaf. You're wonderful, Jorge, Sophia said gratefully. I'll prepare some lemonade for now. They must be parched. When she returned to the great room with a tray of cool lemonade and some of Jorge's cornbread, the men were deep in conversation that abruptly halted at her entrance. Ah, perfect timing, the judge said, accepting a glass with obvious appreciation. Nothing better than cold lemonade on a hot day. Sophia served Ethan, noting the thoughtful expression on his face. Is everything all right? She asked. Yes, he assured her. The judge and I were just discussing some legal matters. Boring stuff, Judge Wilson added. Property lines and water rights. Nothing for a lady to concern herself with. Sophia might have taken offense at his dismissive tone a few months ago, but she'd learned to pick her battles. I'll leave you to it then. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. As she turned to go, Ethan's voice stopped her. Actually, Sophia, there is something legal you should know about. He glanced at the judge, who nodded encouragingly. Judge Wilson brought news about your divorce petition. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Shortly after the Founders' Day dance, she had written to an attorney in Helena about formally ending her marriage to Harold. The process was complicated, divorces being relatively rare and difficult to obtain, especially for women. What news? She asked, sitting in the chair Ethan pulled out for her. The judge set down his lemonade. I've reviewed your petition, Mrs. Turner. Given the circumstances, particularly your husband's, wager I'm inclined to grant the divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. Mr. Turner has been notified but has not contested the filing. Relief washed over Sophia. So it's done. I'm divorced. Not quite yet, the judge cautioned. There's paperwork to complete, a formal hearing though that can be done privately in my chambers and a waiting period. But yes, essentially, your marriage will be legally dissolved within a month, possibly sooner. Thank you, Judge Wilson, Sophia said sincerely. This means more to me than I can express. No thanks needed, my dear. The law exists to protect citizens, not to trap them in unconscionable situations. He picked up his lemonade again. Now, there is the matter of your name. Many divorced women choose to revert to their maiden names. Would you prefer to be known as Mrs. Turner or Miss? He consulted a paper from his pocket. Stanton. Sophia hesitated. She hadn't given much thought to her name after the divorce. I'm not sure. I'll need to consider it. Of course. No rush on that decision. Just let me know before the final papers are filed. After dinner, which proved to be a pleasant affair with the judge entertaining them with stories from his 30 years on the bench. Ethan suggested a walk to help settle their meal. The evening had cooled somewhat, making the prospect appealing after the heat of the day. "I'll show the judge to his room first," Sophia offered. "He must be tired after his journey." "Indeed I am," Judge Wilson agreed. "These old bones aren't made for long rides anymore, but you young folks enjoy your walk." After ensuring the judge was comfortably settled in the best guest room, Sophia joined Ethan on the veranda, where he waited with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I thought we could walk down to the river," he suggested. "It's always cooler there in the evening." The path to the river was well worn from frequent use, winding through a stand of cottonwoods before opening out to a grassy bank where the water flowed lazily in the summer heat. It was one of Sophia's favorite spots on the ranch, peaceful and secluded. They walked in companionable silence for a while, sipping their lemonade and enjoying the gentle sounds of evening crickets beginning their nightly chorus, the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant lowing of cattle. "I hope you don't mind that I arranged for Judge Wilson to handle your divorce," Ethan said finally. "I know it's presumptuous, but when I heard he was coming to the area, it seemed like an opportunity." "I don't mind at all," Sophia assured him. "In fact, I'm grateful. The sooner that chapter of my life is closed, the better." They reached the riverbank and sat on a fallen log that served as a natural bench, watching the last light of day shimmer on the water's surface. "Have you given any thought to your name?" Ethan asked. "Whether you'll go back to Stanton?" Sophia considered the question. "I'm not sure. Turner never truly felt like my name, but Stanton. That belongs to a girl who no longer exists. I'm not the same person I was before I married Harold." "You're stronger," Ethan observed. "More sure of yourself." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "I am." She glanced at him curiously. "How did you know Judge Wilson was handling divorces? I thought he was here about water rights." "That too," Ethan admitted, "but I wrote to him specifically about your situation, called in a favor he owed my father from years ago." The revelation surprised Sophia. "You did that for me?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Sophia, I would do a great deal more than that for you." Her breath caught at the intensity in his voice. "Ethan, let me finish," he said gently. "I've been wanting to say this for some time, but I felt I needed to wait until your situation with Harold was resolved, at least legally." He took a deep breath. "When I tore up that deed the night we met, I did it because no one should own another person. But I've come to realize there are ways to belong to someone that have nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with choice." Sophia felt her heart racing, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I'm not good with words," Ethan continued, setting aside his glass to take her hands in his. "But I need you to know that what began as an employment arrangement has become much more to me. You've brought life and warmth back to a house that was just walls and a roof. You've brought purpose and joy to days that were just work before." "Ethan," Sophia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" His blue eyes held hers, vulnerability and hope mingling in their depths. "I'm saying I love you, Sophia. I think I began falling in love with you that first night, when you faced an impossible situation with such dignity. And every day since has only deepened those feelings." Joy bubbled up within her, so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," she admitted, the words feeling both momentous and utterly natural. "I've been afraid to say it, afraid of complicating everything, but it's true. I love you." Ethan's smile was like sunrise breaking across his features. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with the release of long, restrained emotion. When they finally parted, Both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the Founders' Day dance," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" Sophia asked, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. "I didn't want you to think I was like Harold trying to claim you when you weren't truly free. And I wanted you to be certain of your own feelings, not confused by gratitude or dependency." His consideration touched her deeply. "That's why you're nothing like Harold," she said softly. "You've always respected my choices, my independence. And always will," Ethan promised. "Which is why I'm asking, not assuming." He drew back slightly, his expression solemn. "Sophia Stanton, when your divorce is final, would you consider becoming Sophia McAllister instead?" Tears of happiness sprang to her eyes. "Are you proposing, Mr. McAllister?" "I believe I am, Mrs. Turner," he replied, a smile tugging at his lips, "though perhaps not as eloquently as you deserve." "It was perfect," Sophia assured him. "And yes, I would be honored to become Sophia McAllister." Ethan kissed her again, more confidently this time, his arms encircling her waist and drawing her closer. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above them, Sophia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment, from being a possession to be wagered away, to finding true partnership with a man who valued her mind, her strength, and her heart. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand and slightly disheveled from their riverside embraces, they found Judge Wilson sitting on the veranda, smoking a pipe and looking thoroughly unsurprised by their linked hands and glowing expressions. "Well now," he said, tapping his pipe against the railing, "I believe congratulations are in order." Ethan glanced at Sophia, who nodded her permission. "Yes, sir," he confirmed. "Once the divorce is finalized, we plan to marry." The judge beamed. "Excellent. Nothing I like better than seeing justice done and love triumph in the same case." He gestured to the chairs nearby. "Sit, sit. This calls for a proper conversation about timing." As they settled into the chairs, the judge leaned forward eagerly. "Now, as I mentioned earlier, the divorce could be finalized within a month, however." He paused for dramatic effect. Given the special circumstances and the clear evidence of Mr. Turner's unsuitability as a husband, I might be persuaded to expedite matters. Say 2 weeks instead of 4. Sophia exchanged a surprised look with Ethan. "Is that possible, my dear?" the judge said with a wink. "I am the law in this district, within reason, of course. And reason certainly favors removing you from a marriage that should never have existed and allowing you to enter one based on mutual respect and affection." "That's very kind, Judge Wilson," Ethan said gratefully. "Not kind just," the judge corrected. "Besides, I've known your family for many years, Ethan. Your father would be proud to see you settled with such a fine woman." They spoke for a while longer, making plans for the judge to return in 2 weeks for a private hearing that would finalize the divorce. Then, if all went as planned, he could perform a wedding ceremony the very next day. "Nothing elaborate," Sophia insisted when the subject of wedding preparations arose. "Just us, the ranch hands, and perhaps a few friends." "Rebecca would never forgive us if she weren't invited," Ethan pointed out. "Rebecca, certainly," Sophia agreed. "And Mary Peterson has been surprisingly supportive, perhaps the minister and his family as well." "A small, tasteful affair," the judge approved. "Best kind of wedding, in my opinion. Less fuss, more focus on what truly matters." After the judge retired for the night, Ethan walked Sophia to the door of the East Wing, where they lingered, reluctant to part. "I can hardly believe this is happening," Sophia admitted. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. Now it feels like it's truly beginning." "For both of us," Ethan agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender fingers. I never expected to find you, Sophia. Never thought I'd find someone who could make this house a home, who could make me want more than just success with the ranch. And now I want it all, he said simply. The ranch, a home, a family with you. The word family sent a warm flutter through Sophia's chest. Children, she asked softly. If we're blessed with them, Ethan replied, his voice equally soft. I'd like at least 2 or 3. Growing up an only child was lonely after my sister died. I'd like that too, Sophia said, envisioning little boys with Ethan's blue eyes or girls with his determined chin. But even if it's just the 2 of us, that would be enough. More than enough, Ethan agreed, drawing her into his arms for one last kiss before they parted for the night. Sweet dreams, my love. Sweet dreams, Sophia echoed. Knowing they surely would be, the next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Dillon, generating a wave of goodwill that surprised Sophia. Even people who had initially looked askance at her living arrangement at the ranch now offered congratulations and wedding gifts. Harold, she heard, had left town shortly after the Founders' Day dance, reportedly heading to California to try his luck in the gold fields. The news brought Sophia a sense of closure. Harold was moving on with his life, as she was with hers. Rebecca took charge of wedding preparations with characteristic energy, recruiting Mary Peterson's help to transform the ranch's great room into a fitting venue for the ceremony. When Sophia protested that she didn't need anything elaborate, Rebecca waved away her concerns. Every bride deserves flowers, cake, and a pretty dress, even for a small wedding, she insisted. Besides, this gives the town something happy to focus on. Let them celebrate with you. So Sophia relented, allowing Rebecca to order a wedding cake from the hotel restaurant and arrange for flowers to be brought from Helena. She even agreed to have Mrs. Hollingsworth make her a special dress, ivory, silk with pearl buttons and delicate lace trim, simple but elegant. Something you can wear again for special occasions, the dressmaker suggested. Practical, but still befitting a bride. The evening before Judge Wilson was due to return, Sophia sat on the veranda with Ethan, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders, her head leaned against him in easy intimacy. Nervous? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. About the divorce? Not at all, Sophia replied. About the wedding? Perhaps a little. It feels so public, even with just a few guests. We could elope, Ethan suggested, only half-jokingly. Ride to Helena tonight and find a justice of the peace. Sophia laughed. Rebecca would hunt us down and drag us back for the ceremony she's planned. Besides, she added more seriously, I want to do this properly in our home, surrounded by the people who have supported us. I just hope. What? Ethan prompted when she hesitated. I hope I can be the wife you deserve, Sophia admitted. My first marriage was such a failure. Ethan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Sophia, your marriage to Harold failed because he was unworthy of you, not because of any shortcoming on your part. And this isn't a first marriage for either of us, it's the only one that matters. We're building something new together, something based on mutual respect and love. His words calmed the flutter of anxiety in her chest. You're right, and when I think of being your wife, I feel nothing but joy. As I do at the thought of being your husband, Ethan assured her. Now, I believe you should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a full day. First the divorce, then wedding preparations, then an early night, Sophia recited the plan they'd agreed upon. And the day after tomorrow, you become Mrs. McAllister, Ethan finished, his voice warm with anticipation. Mrs. Sophia McAllister, she repeated, liking the sound of it. It feels right, doesn't it? More right than anything I've ever known, Ethan agreed, sealing the sentiment with a kiss that promised many more to come. Judge Wilson arrived the following morning, bringing with him not only the divorce papers, but also a wedding gift, a beautiful leather-bound Bible with both their names already embossed on the cover in gold leaf. "Presumptuous, perhaps," he acknowledged when they exclaimed over the thoughtful gift. But I had every confidence in the outcome. The divorce proceedings, held in Ethan's study with only the judge and Sophia present, were mercifully brief. Judge Wilson reviewed the petition, confirmed Sophia's desire to end her marriage to Harold, and pronounced the union dissolved with a few strokes of his pen. "And that, my dear, is that," he declared, handing her the final decree. "You are now, legally and in all other respects, Sophia Stanton once again, at least until day after tomorrow." Sophia felt a curious lightness as she accepted the document, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally been lifted. "Thank you, Judge Wilson. Thank the law, my dear. It may move slowly at times, but eventually it bends toward justice." He gathered his papers, tucking them into his leather satchel. "Now, I understand there are wedding preparations requiring attention. I shall make myself scarce until dinner." After the judge departed to explore the ranch with Luke as his guide, Sophia sought out Ethan, finding him in the barn checking a horseshoe on his favorite mount. "It's done," she said simply, holding up the decree. Ethan straightened, his expression solemn but his eyes bright with emotion. "How do you feel?" "Free," Sophia replied honestly, "and ready for tomorrow." His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "As am I." Rebecca arrived later that afternoon with a wagon full of flowers, ribbons, and other decorations, accompanied by Mary Peterson and her daughter Emily, who had volunteered to help with preparations. "Men are banished from the house until dinner," Rebecca announced imperiously. "We have work to do." Ethan accepted his exile with good grace, heading out to the pastures with Charlie to check on a new calf. Under Rebecca's direction, the great room was transformed with garlands of wildflowers and ribbons, while Jorge outdid himself preparing special dishes for the wedding feast. By evening, most of the preparations were complete, leaving only final touches for the morning. As they gathered for dinner, Sophia, Ethan, Judge Wilson, Rebecca, and the ranch hands, there was a festive atmosphere, a sense of anticipation that made even simple conversation seem significant. "A toast," Judge Wilson proposed, raising his glass. "To endings that make new beginnings possible, and to Sophia and Ethan, who remind us that true love finds a way, even in the most unlikely circumstances." "Hear, hear," Rebecca seconded, clinking her glass against the others. "And may their example inspire others to seek partnerships based on respect and affection, rather than convenience or obligation." After dinner, Rebecca insisted that Sophia spend her last night as a single woman in the East Wing, while Ethan would stay in the bunkhouse with Luke and Charlie. "It's tradition," she declared when Sophia protested the unnecessary separation. "The groom shouldn't see the bride before the wedding. Besides, it will make tomorrow all the sweeter." So Sophia found herself alone in her rooms for the final time tomorrow night. She would move to the master's suite in the West Wing, which she and Ethan would share as husband and wife. The thought sent a thrill of nervous anticipation through her. Sleep came eventually, though fitfully, her dreams a kaleidoscope of images from the past and hopes for the future. She woke early, the dawn light filtering through her curtains, and lay quietly for a moment, savoring the knowledge that by sunset she would be Ethan's wife. A knock at her door announced Rebecca's arrival, already fully dressed and bursting with energy despite the early hour. "Up, up," she called cheerfully. "We have a bride to prepare." The morning passed in a blur of activity, a bath scented with lavender, hair carefully arranged with fresh flowers woven among the curls. The new dress fitted one last time by Mrs. Hollingsworth, who had arrived early to make any necessary adjustments. By midday, guests began to arrive, the minister and his family, several neighbors from nearby ranches, even Judge Preston, whose presence surprised Sophia until Rebecca explained he was a distant cousin of Ethan's mother and had specifically asked to attend. Besides, Rebecca added with characteristic frankness, having the most influential man in the county witness your marriage can only help establish your position as Mrs. McAllister. At 3 o'clock, with the afternoon sun casting a golden glow through the windows of the great room, Sophia stood ready in her ivory silk dress, a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. Luke, who had volunteered to walk her down the aisle in place of a father, waited beside her. "You look beautiful, madam," he said, his usual taciturn manner softened by the occasion. "Boss is a lucky man." "Thank you, Luke," Sophia replied, touched by his simple sincerity. "I'm the lucky one." The soft strains of a violin played by a musician Rebecca had somehow procured from Helena signaled the start of the ceremony. As Sophia entered the great room on Luke's arm, her eyes immediately found Ethan, standing tall and handsome before the fireplace where Judge Wilson waited to perform the ceremony. The look in Ethan's eyes as he watched her approach, a mixture of awe, tenderness, and unmistakable love, dispelled any lingering nervousness. This was right. This was where she belonged. Judge Wilson's words washed over her like a benediction as he spoke of commitment, partnership, and the sacred bond of marriage. When it came time for their vows, Ethan's voice rang clear and steady, promising to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. Sophia's own voice trembled slightly as she repeated the words, not from doubt but from the depth of emotion behind them. "I, Sophia, take you, Ethan, to be my lawfully wedded husband." When Judge Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was both gentle and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. Applause and cheers erupted from their small gathering, led enthusiastically by Rebecca, who looked as proud as if she'd arranged the match herself. The celebration that followed was joyous, but intimate, exactly what Sophia had wanted. Jorge's feast was declared the finest meal ever served in Dillon County. The cake from Helena was cut with much ceremony, and toasts were offered to the happiness of the bride and groom. As evening approached, guests gradually departed, leaving only the judge, who would stay one more night before returning to Helena. Rebecca was the last to leave, hugging Sophia tightly before climbing into her buggy. "Be happy," she whispered. "You both deserve it." And then they were alone, truly alone as husband and wife for the first time. Ethan took Sophia's hand, leading her up the stairs to the master's suite that was now theirs to share. "Welcome home, Mrs. McAllister," he said softly as they crossed the threshold. In the privacy of their room, with moonlight spilling through the windows and the sounds of the Montana night creating a gentle backdrop, they came together as husband and wife, their love expressed in whispered words, tender touches, and the profound joining of two people who had found in each other not just passion but true partnership. Later, nestled in the circle of Ethan's arms, Sophia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led her to this moment. From the frightened woman whose husband had wagered her in a card game to the confident bride who had chosen her own destiny, it seemed almost like a dream. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "I'm thinking about that night you tore up the deed," Sophia answered truthfully. "How terrified I was, how uncertain of my future. And now—" She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "Now I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, with exactly who I'm meant to be with, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Ethan's smile in the moonlight was tender beyond words. "Nor I," he murmured, drawing her closer. "Nor I." 5 years later, the September sun cast long shadows across the yard of the McAllister ranch as Sophia sat on the veranda, watching her husband teach their 3-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. The boy's delighted laughter carried clearly on the autumn air as Ethan led the gentle mare in a careful circle. "Mama, look," James called, his small hands clutching the saddle horn with determination. "I'm riding like Papa." "I see, sweetheart," Sophia called back, smiling at the picture they made Ethan's tall figure guiding the pony, his hand ready to catch James if needed, their son's dark hair catching the sunlight just like his father's. Beside Sophia in a cradle, their 6-month-old daughter, Elizabeth, slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. She had Sophia's fair coloring and already signs of her mother's determined nature. The ranch had prospered beyond their expectations in the 5 years since their marriage. What had begun as a modest operation was now one of the most successful in the territory, with expanded herds, prize-winning horses, and a reputation for fair dealing that brought buyers from as far away as Chicago. The house, too, had continued to evolve, with additions to accommodate their growing family and improvements that combined practical needs with beauty. Sophia's garden had become famous throughout the county, providing not only food for their table but flowers and medicinal herbs that she often shared with neighbors. Her position in the community had likewise flourished. What had once been whispered gossip about that Turner woman had transformed into respect for Mrs. McAllister, who now sat on the school board, hosted reading circles for the ranch children and adults, and was generally acknowledged as one of Dillon's leading citizens. As for Harold, they had heard he eventually made his way to San Francisco, where he reportedly found work as a clerk in a shipping office. The gambling habit that had nearly destroyed Sophia's life had apparently been conquered by necessity, if not by choice. She sometimes thought of him with a distant sort of pity, hoping he had found some measure of peace. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. McAllister." The voice belonged to Rebecca, who had arrived for her weekly visit and now settled into the chair beside Sophia, her own rounded belly evidence of the child she and her husband, Stephen, were expecting in November. "Just counting my blessings," Sophia replied with a smile, "and they are many." "Indeed they are," Rebecca agreed, watching as Ethan lifted James from the pony and swung him high in the air, producing another burst of childish giggles. "You've built something remarkable here, both of you." "We have," Sophia acknowledged. "Though sometimes I still can't quite believe how it all began." Rebecca laughed softly. "You mean with the most honorable man in Montana winning you in a card game?" "And tearing up the deed," Sophia added, the memory now transformed from a source of pain to a cherished part of their story. "That was the moment, you know, when I first began to hope that maybe, just maybe, there were good men in the world after all." "And there are," Rebecca agreed, patting her belly. "We were fortunate enough to find 2 of them." In the yard, Ethan was showing James how to thank the pony with a carrot, teaching even at this early age the importance of treating animals with kindness and respect. Watching them, Sophia felt a wave of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. From the cradle came a small sound as Elizabeth stirred, her blue eyes Ethan's eyes opening to the world. Sophia lifted her daughter, cradling her close as she had once been certain she would never cradle a child of her own. "Hello, my sweet girl," she murmured, pressing a kiss to the baby's downy head. "Did you have good dreams?" Ethan looked up from his lesson with James, his gaze finding Sophia and Elizabeth on the veranda. Even after 5 years, the love in his eyes when he looked at her still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to James, who immediately began running toward the house, his small legs pumping with excitement. "Mama, Papa says it's time for the story." The boy called as he clambered up the porch steps. It was their family tradition every Sunday afternoon. They gathered on the veranda if the weather was fine, or by the fireplace if it wasn't, and Sophia told the children stories. Sometimes they were fairy tales or folk legends, but James's favorite was always the true story of how his parents met. The story about the brave cowboy and the paper he tore up, Sophia asked, though she knew the answer. Yes. James climbed onto Rebecca's lap, making himself comfortable. Auntie Becca needs to hear it too. Ethan joined them, settling beside Sophia and slipping an arm around her shoulders, his other hand gently caressing Elizabeth's cheek. "Once upon a time," Sophia began, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller, "there was a woman who thought her life was over, when really it had only just begun." As she recounted their tale, carefully edited for young ears, but true in all the ways that mattered, Sophia watched her son's rapt face, felt her daughter's steady breathing against her chest, and leaned into the strength of her husband's embrace. The deed that Harold had signed, believing he could trade her like property, had been torn to pieces long ago. But the love that had grown from that moment of courage and decency had only strengthened with time, creating bonds that no paper could ever define and no gambler could ever wager away. This, Sophia thought as she finished the story to James's satisfied smile and Ethan's tender kiss on her temple, was what freedom truly meant. Not merely the absence of chains, but the presence of choice, of purpose, of love freely given and joyfully received. "And they lived happily ever after," she concluded, the traditional ending both a promise and a truth already being lived each day at the McAllister ranch. "Always," Ethan whispered, for her ears alone. "Always."